Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another new video. Today I want to take a look at Polybar. And because when I was doing some browsing on the internet about how to use Polybar with the awesome window manager, which I'm using right now, and the first thing I came across was a whole bunch of people on the subreddit asking just why on earth would you want to do that. I will explain very briefly why I would want to use Polybar, and it comes down to if I take a look at my awesome config, something I did when I was first setting awesome up, and that was rather than using awesome window manager's default ability to set wallpapers, I instead reached for something different. Now, originally it was a program called Nitrogen that I used to set wallpapers. I actually still kind of use it for some things. It's still on my system. And now I've switched now to something called Faye, which is an image viewer. It's a good image viewer. You should check it out. And I use that to set wallpapers instead. And the reason for doing that is because I'm not totally sure that I'm always going to want to stick around with Awesome Window Manager. I like it. I've been using it the whole time that I've sort of switched to Linux. I like it, but there are a million window managers out there. I mean, just a ton. There are ones like Awesome that have bars built in, Xmonad, and I believe i3 has a bar, although a lot of people like to sort of supplement it and change it. I think maybe Qtile has a bar. There's a whole bunch of window managers out there that have a status bar type thing built in. And if you're using that window manager exclusively and you never have any plans on switching to a different window manager, it would make sense to use those tools. If I was planning on never switching to Awesome, it would make sense to use Awesome's built-in wallpaper setter functionality. Even though, you know, Faye is such a tiny application, and I already had it as an image viewer, so I'm really not installing any extra software to set wallpapers, but, you know, whatever. All I mean to say is that if you're going to be jumping around window managers, which I might, I don't necessarily plan on it, but I want to leave the option open, it would make sense to sort of outsource some of the functionality of your system onto other programs. You don't want everything that happens on your system to be done via a window manager. Like some things, for example, like launching applications, makes sense to me to do in a window manager, but setting wallpapers, the status bar, if I'm switching window managers, and they all have slightly different ways of handling where they place windows and how they split and that type of thing, but I always have the same bar, I imagine I'll be pretty happy no matter what window manager I'm using. So that's the thinking here. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. I've got Ardbeg 10 here. Listen to this cork, guys. That's a great cork. Let's go ahead and get started. First thing that we will probably want to do is actually install Polybar, which if you're on, I believe it's Ubuntu or Debian or stuff, you can do apt install Polybar, and I'm pretty sure Polybar is in just the main repository. Now, if you're in Arch, slightly more complex. You can't just do like a standard pacman-s install Polybar, because Polybar is an AUR. So you can either download it and compile it yourself, or you can use the AUR helper. I mentioned how to work with an AUR helper sort of tangentially in my last video, so you can check that out if you want, or if not, there's plenty of other people that have great videos about many different AUR helpers. But what you can do is you can do yay -s. I'm using yay as my AUR helper, and install Polybar. And it should give you the option to install either Polybar or Polybar Git. It's not right now, but that's all right. We don't want to progress any further. I've already installed it. But what we can do is we can just do yay-ss, search for Polybar, and you can see we have one package called Polybar and one package called Polybar Git. Now, Polybar Git is going to be the most recent version, and just standard Polybar is going to be the latest stable version. I have just standard Polybar installed. Anyways, once you have Polybar installed, we need to pull some configs for it. If we go into our standard config directory, that is where this lives, you can cd into .config in your home directory. We have a folder called Polybar. If you do not have a folder called Polybar, go ahead and make it. Just do make dir Polybar, and then you can change directory into it. And you shouldn't have any files in here. I'm gonna ditch my config real quick, and now we have an empty list of files. So in order to get a config, we're lucky because Polybar is one of those apps that has a default config that it stores on the system. I believe it's in user share docs Polybar config. Yep, there we go. Cool. So what you want to do is you do cp copy from /user share doc polybar config, and you're going to copy that into ~.config/polybar, and then we should have a standard config file there. If we go ahead and open up that config file in a text editor, by the way, I'm using Vim, but it would be very easy to use Atom or Sublime or anything else that you like. But I'm going to go into this config here, and let's take a look at it. I'm going to remove this fluff from the top, and the first thing we're doing is defining some colors here, and I'm just going to clean that up a bit. And then what we have is we have something called bar/example. What this is we're defining one polybar and we're calling it example. I'm gonna go ahead and change the name of that to just like Mac. Sure, that's a good name. And then if we come down a bit, what we're really just going to be doing is defining all of the different variables that are in the bar. So if you look right here, underneath where we've defined the bar and the name of the bar, what we have is a section here where we say what modules we want to have where on the bar. And then the rest of this config is just defining those modules. So if I pick a module, say here, like the date module, and I search for date, here you can see we have a module called date where we define all the things that are going to build up that module. And that's how this config works. But let's go ahead and try to run it here. Now, if you go into your config or into your terminal, you can just type in polybar and then the name of the bar. So I renamed mine to Mac. You can see it'll fire up the bar instantly, and it'll have a couple of different modules here for us: some CPU and drive usage, Wi-Fi, temps, the time, the volume, all sorts of stuff like that. Nothing too complex, but we have a sort of standard bar here now, and it's running. So let's make it a little cleaner. And the first step with Awesome Window Manager is actually getting rid of the bar that we have here by default. So what we can do is I'm going to go into my Awesome Window Manager configuration, which should be in .config/awesome/rclua. And the way that this works, with Awesome at least, is if I bring over my sort of Git repo here, Git history, it's literally just going to be a matter of removing all the pieces of the config that relate to the wee bar, or that's what this bar up here is called. And this changes a bit. The sort of gist that I found wasn't quite accurate anymore. It was telling me to remove some things that didn't exist. So at this point in time, this sort of snapshot in the history of my Git repository should show you everything that you need to remove in order to get this wee bar to disappear without breaking anything. So I'm going to leave a link to this, and you can sort of use it as a guide if you want to. But just keep in mind, as Awesome continues to update, this will probably change a bit, whatever. Anyways, we're going to use this as the guide right now because I've gone through and figured out what I needed to remove. So the first thing we want to look for is down here, awful.widget.launcher, and we can just go ahead and delete those lines. And that should be this icon up here, I believe, is what we're removing. And then what we need to do is come down. We want to skip this section right here, menu bar utils terminal. And then what we have here is awful keyboard layout, awful widget keyboard layout, and then a whole bunch of stuff relating to the wee bar and the wee box for each screen. So we can delete a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to just start deleting. And when we get down to the stuff about setting wallpapers, we'll stop here. So that was a good 60 to 100. That was a good like 40 or so lines of stuff we deleted there. And then we're going to skip over the wallpaper because we will leave that functionality to create wallpapers if we need to. And we'll come right down to, there's a line here, create a prompt box for each screen. And that again is part of the WeBox thing. We can just start to delete that again. Again, this is going to be like another good 30 to 40 lines that we're deleting. Start deleting lines. We're going to stop right here where we see end and then close parenthesis. That should be the end of this wallpaper function. So we wouldn't need to keep that in or else it's not going to work properly. We need to have a closing tag for the function. And then we'll come down just a tiny bit more to mod key X, the keyboard shortcut. What we can do is we can literally just search for mod key space closing squiggly bracket comma open X. Okay, and we're going to delete this whole function down to the spot where it says menu bar here, and then we'll come down a tiny bit more, and that should actually be about it. That should do it. Now if we go ahead and save and then reload Awesome Window Manager, which the keyboard shortcut for that is Control Super R, the Wii bar should disappear up here. So reload. Okay, it's gone now. Now we still have the ability to switch between different tags on the screen. So if we come over to a new tag, open a terminal, we can swap forward and back between our different desktops and go to other ones. We still have 9 the same way that we had before. We'll still have all the same functionality. We just literally will not have the status bar up top that will sort of tell us more info or whatever. And we'll get another one in a sec. So first thing we need to do is set up a way for Polybar to run with Awesome Window Manager. As soon as Awesome starts, we want Polybar to run. Now, the way that that's going to work is we're going to use this awful spawn with shell command to start up a script that we'll use to start Polybar. So if you don't know how that works, you can just come anywhere in your, basically anywhere in your Awesome Window Manager config. I like to do it at the bottom of the screen, and you'll type in awful.spawn.with_shell, open and close some parenthesis, open and close some quotes, and then inside of this you can type in the name of an application or the location of a bash script or anything else. So in our case we'll do the location of a bash script. So it's going to be in /home/my_username/.config, and I'm just going to put it in my Polybar config directory, and I will call it like launch.sh, and that can be our launch shell script. So what we're saying now is that every time Awesome Window Manager starts, we're just going to run this shell script with it. And then inside of that shell script, we'll just create a way to launch Polybar really quickly. Now, if you're interested, there's a number of different ways to create this script. But what I did was I went to the Arch Wiki, again, like my most used website now. And then I searched up Polybar, and then right down here, they have a sample script that will do exactly what we needed to do, run Polybar on startup. So we could literally just copy this over and go into our config for Polybar, and we'll create a new file called launch.sh. This is our shell script. And if we go into that script, paste in that script, what we really have are 3 lines here. You need this shebang line up at the top. All it's going to do is like declare that this is a bash script, and then what it's going to do is it's going to first kill any instances of Polybar that are already running, and then what it's going to do is it's going to run Polybar along with a bar called mybar. Now if you remember, in the config for Polybar, I renamed mybar to be Mac. So what we would do is go into that shell script and just change mybar to Mac. And then if we exit and reload Awesome Window Manager right now, the wallpaper is going to look weird, but just trust me. It will launch Awesome Window Manager and do nothing else. Something is broken somewhere. Let's go into the Awesome Window Manager config. I just realized what the problem is. We did not make this script executable. So the way that you have to do that is you're going to type in chmod +x on launch.sh, hit enter. If nothing pops up, that means it was successful. Then if we reload Awesome again, we have a bar up here. Cool, that's a good start. And now we can actually just start to edit this bar. So if we open up the config file in Awesome or in Vim or something, there's a couple of things you'll notice. There's a few things we could do that maybe if we change the width to like 50%, for example, save the changes. It's not going to update the bar immediately, but what we can do is just quickly reload Awesome Window Manager, and it will reload the bar as well. So that's sort of how this is going to work. We're going to make a little edit, reload the window manager, and you'll just have to deal with the wallpaper changing dramatically, because whenever I reload Awesome, it reloads the window manager. That's just how my configuration is set up. So anyways, let's go ahead and go into this config file, and the first thing I want to do is get rid of this weird spacing around the edges of the screen. That's really stupid. So the first thing I'll do is I'll come down to the radius, and I'll just set that to 0.0, and then I'm going to do the same thing down here with the border size. Just gonna set that to 0 as well. And then if we reload, bar should be stuck to the top of the screen. Very, very nice. Now, let's jack with some colors a bit. Up here at the top, we have 4 colors that I want to focus on: the background alternative, and the foreground alternative. I want to set the foreground and the foreground alternative to the same color. And then I also want to set the background and the background alternative to the same color as well. But what I would like to do is incorporate a bit of transparency into the window. So what I could do is I could set the background to F0, F0, F0. Whoops. That's 0F, 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 which is the same background that I use for my terminals. And if you pay attention closely and I reload here, the background color will change ever so slightly. But what I want to do is incorporate a bit of transparency in that. And the way that you do that is by prefixing 2 digits to the front of this color value here. Now, this is a hexadecimal color value. And without getting too much into base 14, imagine that you just have a scale of 16 numbers that you can work with. So, for example, 1 is 1, 5 is 5, F is 16, A is 11, B is 12, and so forth. 16 is the max, 1 or 0 is the minimum, and you're setting values with 2 of these digits. So in theory, FF would be 100%, 00 would be 0%, hexadecimal, it sounds really stupid, but it's like base 14 rather than base 10, whatever. If we, for example, set this to 88, that should get us a decent amount of transparency. Let's reload the screen here, and you can see we have a nice and transparent bar up here. Perhaps too transparent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the opacity or the transparency here to DD, which should be pretty close to FF, like pretty close to like max transparency, but not quite there. I hope that makes any sense at all. It very well might not, but that's just how hexadecimal works. Reload, and we have a bar with a bit of translucency. Enough that you really couldn't quite tell it was there unless you were looking closely, but as we cycle through some different monitors, it'll get a bit of a varied look, and we have some translucency. It's not just a black bar at the top of the screen. That's sort of the kind of thing that I like. And then, of course, we're just going to copy the exact same value down here to our background alternate color. Save those changes. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start just removing modules because really the only thing that I'm super interested in is the date module here. I'm going to use applets to control a lot of things. I'm going to install like a sound applet, and I'll probably do like a battery applet if I need to or something like that. But like the volume controls, I'm not really interested in. All they're doing is letting me mute things and giving me like a value. I don't really need the temperature of the CPU and the disk usage and that type of thing. I will install a network applet, but again, I'm not gonna need this up here. So what we can do is if we come down to the part of the screen where we're defining what's in each bit, you'll see we have modules that are going to line up on the left, modules that are going to line up on the center, modules that are going to line up on the right. So what I'll do is I'm going to put the date in the center, and we do have a date module, it's right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start deleting basically everything else that's here. I'll leave like the battery because that's not going to be relevant on this particular system, but my other system, my laptop, that will pop up on. And that's it actually. And I'll leave BSBWM and i3 up here. What this will do is if you're running the Polybar on BSBWM or i3, it will put an app switcher up there for you. But now if I reload, save and reload, our Polybar should have a date in the center and some taskbar like icons to the side. And that's called the tray. So if we wanted to, we could position the tray on the left or in the center and reload, and the positioning of those icons will change. And I'll also want to remove this line right here on them underneath this. And the easiest way to do that, I think, would be to go up to the line size here. I don't like the lines that are in Polybar by default. And I'm going to set the line size to 0. And then I also want to use the true center for this module right here. So, or fixed center. This isn't quite in the center. It's in the center of like nothing being over here and the tray icons being over here, but that's stupid. So I'm gonna set that to true. And then if we reload, date should be dead center, should have no lines. Very, very nice. So now let's jack with the date. And the way that we would do that is we would come down here and we would look for the module for the date, or the date module. And the cool thing about the way that this module works is that if you're familiar with the command on the command line just called date, this date command that's printed out onto our bar up here is identical to the command, or well, it doesn't use exactly the same parameters as this date command. But anyways, the point is you can customize this date command. So I have a little alias here, runs the same command with some options, and it prints out the same date and time in a different format. We can do the same thing over here with this date. So what we can do is if we pull up the man page for date and come down a bit, here under format, where you see all these percent signs, these are all of the different options that you can use. So you can use percent sign B to print out the name of the month, or lowercase b to print out a shortened name of the month, that kind of thing. I'm not going to take a look at this because I pretty much know what I want. I've used this date command enough to know what we're looking at here. But what we can also do is we'll delete this underline color here, and that prefix there, and the label here is going to print out the date and the time. The date equals this date. We also don't need these alternate date or this alternate time settings. What that does is when you click on the date, it'll do different things for you, but that seems dumb to me. I don't understand how that's helpful. So what we can do is if we were to come up to the date and we type in, this is the date, and then we come to the time and we type in, this is the time, and then down here under date and time, and we just do a dash in between the two. If we were to reload the window manager, you can see how this is going to work. This label down here is what's going to actually be printed. And what it's going to print is whatever this date section is, then whatever this time section is, and any other characters that we put in here. So what I can do is I'm going to come to the label down here, and I'm just going to put 2 spaces in between the date and time, 2 like just normal blank spaces. That should be enough spacing that we can differentiate between the 2, and we'll be good to go. And then because I've used the date and time command enough, I sort of know what type of thing I'm going to want up here. But what I'll do for the date is I'm going to do %A, or I'll do %B and then %D. And what that should do, if we reload, is it's going to put the month and then the day of the month. Now we could also do, I think, %A maybe, and then a comma would print out the day of the week also, if that's something you're into. Again, you can just look through that man page that we brought up earlier. I don't know, maybe I'll leave the day of the week up there for now. But what we're really interested in is having the time as well. And what I want is just sort of a standard 12-hour time with AM and or PM. So the way that you can do that pretty easily is I'm going to do %L colon %M. This is very case sensitive. And then space %P, save that, reload the bar, and there we have a nice little date up there in our bar. And we also have some task bars here as well. Very, very nice. But the other thing I want to focus on is I want to focus on a couple of other applets that we can use that will sort of control some things for us. So like I mentioned, rather than using this sort of standard built-in volume thing that's there in Polybar and the standard network thing that's there in Polybar, that really all that's doing is printing out information for us, I much prefer the idea of having a little icon, an applet, which I can then click on and get some more options with. So rather than just having a thing that will print out the volume of my system, it makes more sense to have a volume icon that I can click on and then adjust the volume. Same thing for the networking. So there's 2 tools that I like for doing that. The first is called Kmix, and if you're using Arch, you can just do pacman-s Kmix. This is a sound applet. And then there's a network applet that I like. It's called the Network Manager applet. So what you can do is you can do pack-s Network Manager applet. And then since we're using Awesome Window Manager, we have to start these with the Awesome Window Manager. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to, just for a second, go back into that Awesome Window Manager configuration, and down we're all the way at the bottom where we're launching apps. 2 more little apps we need to launch with Awesome. The first, of course, is called Kmix. That's our sound applet. And then the second here is that Network Manager applet. The way you run it is with nm-applet. Okay, and then if we reload Awesome one more time, we have a sound controller where we can control all of the sound, both input and output, into our system. And then we have a network applet that pops up where we can disconnect and connect to network, Wi-Fi networks with a GUI application. And then we have Dropbox here, and that's the OBS thing, but just ignore that for now. Very, very cool. That's really all there is to getting Polybar working on Awesome. Now again, this is a super, super basic configuration, and there are a lot of more things that you could do with Polybar, but I'm not interested in something too complex. I mean, maybe this looks like GNOME, but that's fine. GNOME looks kind of cool. Quick little addition bonus round to this video. I've been messing around a little bit today, and I came across this interesting thing here. Polybar-Spotify. It's by okay, let's look at the actual name there. Jesse Van Reensch. Anyways. All we need to do is get this little script that he's built here. This is the raw here. It's a little Python script, not too complex, it looks like, although I don't know anything about Python, so to my eyes, it's just gibberish. What we can do is we could do a Git clone. What I'm going to do is just sort of build this script myself by just copy and pasting, which I don't know, that seems kind of sketchy, but I don't want it to like update and break. And if it ever breaks on me, I'll come back to this repo and see what the heck I need to do with it. But for now, I'll just go into my Polybar config and, well, we'll remove that Spotify status thing and pretend we're doing this live. So we'll create a new script, call it Spotify status.py. And then if we go into that script, we can just grab the raw for the script. So we'll, let's see, go into that and we'll just click on the raw. And then we can just copy and paste the entire thing, drop that right in there, and let's see here. It looks like Python, I don't really know, but anyways, what we can then do is, I think we just need to make this script executable. So we'll do chmod +x on Spotify status.py. It should be executable now, and we're good to edit our config for Polybar and add this nice little Spotify module to it. So we'll come down below the, we'll just come down to the bottom, right above these settings. And if we go to this config page again, he's actually got what we need to put right here. And there's some additional information on this page. I'll make sure to drop it in a link. You know how it is. So we'll just copy this module again. And I don't think I'm going to do the underline thing, so I can probably just delete that. And then I just need to put the path to the script. So in my case, that's going to be home/mac/config/polybar/Spotify status.py. And that should actually be good. Let's go ahead and just exit out of that. And if I reload, I'm going to do a clean like reload of Awesome and everything and see what the heck happens. And then if we go ahead and launch Spotify here, whoop, that went to the wrong display for some reason. And then let's see here. Let's just play a song. In theory, it should pop right up here in the center. Okay, it's not doing that. Oh, you know what? I better know what the issue is. Let's go back into the config/polybar. And what we need to do is tell, all we've done is define the module for Spotify. So it's telling what script to load and what to do with it and that type of thing. But we need to actually tell it where to put it, which we did not. So we're going to put it maybe just right here in the center, and we'll add Spotify there. Save. Oh, and it pops up immediately. There it is. There's the song playing. And if we come through and maybe try to like skip through songs or something, it's going to change. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. But that's it for this video, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for checking it out and watching and all the good stuff. And I will see you in the next one. Let's see if we can end with a slightly better wallpaper than that. Come on. Got like 100 wallpapers. None of them are any good. Okay, whatever. Screw it. Thanks for watching, guys.